First, can I just say a huge welcome to Tessa Rickson and to Dr. Sue Field, and also to Carl for coming all the way from Australia at 10 and 11 o'clock at night, I think. So thank you very much for being here. So this is just the shape of the meeting today. And I'm doing indeed my opening remarks and introductions. And then we're going to have these presentations from Tessa and from Sue, which I'm really looking forward to. And then we've got some commission business sort of after that. So Tessa and Sue, if you feel like you have to go to bed, I completely understand, but we'd be very, very happy if you wanted to stay as well. It's sort of hopefully interesting to all of us. So without further ado, I think I'm going to stop sharing and say over to you, Tessa, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Kate, thank you so much for inviting me and having me along. And thank you, Carl, as well. And hello to everyone who I haven't met before in person. And yes, thoughts with Sue and Carl at the moment in terms of being representing the late night Southern Hemisphere people. It's well past my bedtime, but hopefully I will be very articulate for you tonight rather. So hi, my name is Tessa Rickson. I'm a lecturer in Cenography at the Queensland University of Technology, so on the east coast of Australia. And just a little bit of a background about myself first, and then Kate has asked me to speak on, with the theme of works in progress around a 2-year project I've been working on of guest editing a special edition on Australian cenography. So I'll sort of share that, and happy to sort of do a bit of a pre-launch with you. You'll be the first people who get to see the contents and the running order for that special edition, which is coming out at the end of the year. So I lecture in cenography at my institution as part of our technical theatre undergraduate degree, which is one of the most, if I can toot our own horn, sort of one of the most well-recognised production degrees in the country. And so my background professionally is as a lighting and new media designer, mostly for dance, but also for theatre as well. And so in terms of my teaching, I run our cenography degree at QUT, which is a really wonderful program that moves beyond just our fine arts cohort of technical theatre students, but incorporates drama, acting, visual arts, interior design, a really broad sweep of undergraduates from across our faculty who want to come in and learn about performance design. And so we run a 2-year program with them that does both theory and history and key players in the field, but also skills and techniques from model box making to digital visualization to creating realizing a real intermediate theatre production as a group. And that's been very interesting during COVID, as I'm sure any of you who have anything to do with education very well know over the past 2 years. And so in terms of my research, my primary area is looking at intermediate performance and digital scenography in live performance. And I've also been writing for the past few years and starting to kind of hopefully turn a little bit more attention onto Australian cenographic practice and writing about Australian cenographic identity, as that's kind of how I've ended up with this project for Scene, which has been a really amazing opportunity to do sort of what is really a first it's been about 10 years since there's been a special edition on talking about Australian performance design, and so it's really great to kind of have a chance to pick the threads of that conversation up again and sort of see what everyone's up to, and publish some works out from that. And of course, it's only a snapshot of some of the things that are happening, but some of them are really exciting, as I'll talk about. And so my majority of what I do with my research is if I in my practice as well, as looking at new modes of incorporating technology into life performance. So looking at ideas around symbiosis and authenticity in digital cenography, and I'm currently doing evidence-based research into the impact of digital technology on audience experience of authenticity in live performance, and that's ongoing at the moment with some the few live performances that are able to happen in Australia at the moment. I'm very fortunate where I am in Queensland that we do have shows on the stage, which, you know, is a real privilege, not just in Australia but around the world as well, to be able to do case studies of live performance there. And so that has got me asking a lot of questions around how are Australian designers using the latest in technology, but more importantly, why are we using it, and what does the impact that really technologized designs, the impact they have on the audience experience of work? Because a lot of research showing that audiences want authentic experience of live performance, but no conversation about what impact a lot of projection or interactive systems or LED technology, or even things like augmented reality, what that has on the impact of that experience. So that's what I'm hoping to offer with this research, to provide future theatre makers some evidence-based approach in that sense. And so I've also been writing about digital pedagogy in the technical theatre and scenography education over the past couple of years with COVID happening, and hopefully we have a book in the process for that one, which won't come out for next year. The book process is very long. And then the other sort of thing I've been looking at in my research at the moment is ecological and sustainable approaches to design, and particularly looking at the role that technology and digital cenography might have to play in that eco-cenography space. You know, what is, if any, and that's a hard question for me to answer from my position, is the role of technology in that space. And so I've been doing some research with some Australian companies in terms of new touring practices, new sustainability sustainable creation models for ensuring we can get spectacle, like Australian spectacle theatre. You know, particularly there's a few companies that are making really big, flashy, amazing work, but we can't tour it to our regions because of how just the geographic location of Australia, both nationally and internationally as well. So what role technology might have to play in sustainability in that sense. And then I've also started working with the wonderful Tanya Bear, who's now based quite close to me in Brisbane, and our colleague over at York University, Ian Garrett. And we're about to kick off next week a tri-university eco-design project with our undergrads. That's along with the, if I can remember all the partners for this project, it's with the Climate Change Theatre Action, it's with Trigger, it's in partnership with World Stage Design. There's a few other partners in there that I definitely will have forgotten. So it's been wonderful sort of working with Tanya and Ian, and also hosting Tanya's eco-cenography reading groups I've just started as well. So I'm finding myself a lot in that space, in the eco-cenography space at the moment. And so, and apologies, it's a bit of a long-winded introduction to who I am, but I know Kate asked me to just kind of give a bit of a brief about who I am and some of the things I'm looking at. And I've also just been invited by Kate and Patty to take part in ITAC for next year. So sort of looking at some of Australia's contributions to that event. So that's the long blurb about who I am. So I might just share, I just threw together because everyone loves pictures, right? And pictures speak 1,000 words. So I have pulled together just some images from this upcoming special edition that I really wanted to show today, just a couple from every section. So this is going to be scene will be coming out. It's set to be published just before the end of the year. We're just going to make it into 2021, and so it's going to be a double spread on Australian cenography. And so in terms of the sort of the theme of works in progress, this one has been going on for it'll be almost exactly 2 years for the date that it's published, that we've been working on this and it happened when I sent the wonderful Christine White, who's one of the co-editors of Scene, along with Alison Oddie, a suggestion for a paper that I wanted her to publish. And she's like, okay, I can publish the paper. How about you guest edit the entire special edition for me? I'm like, okay, I'll do that. The things you do to get papers published, hey? But it turned into this really amazing opportunity. And so the process began in January of 2020, like before, we had really globally even heard of COVID-19 even wasn't even called that at that point. And so a lot of things have changed since then. It's also why the process has sort of blown out. It was a special edition that was going to come out a little bit earlier. I should, and I didn't begin with this, but just to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I am meeting you from today, which is the Turrbal Miyagaru people, also the same land that my institution is based on, and just pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. So the process of creating Scene, in terms of the background for and sort of the field that this special edition was going to go into, and Kate, I'm sorry, I didn't start my timer, so please give me a bit of a warning when I get to like 5 minutes towards the end of my time, right? Because I've just completely lost track of time. But again, I'll try not to waffle too much. So as I mentioned before, it's been about 10 years since we had a special edition of any journal dedicated expressly to Australian performance design. The last one came from our national drama journal, the Australasian Drama Studies Journal, which was actually co-edited by the wonderful Andrew Filmer, who has gone on to big and wonderful things, of course. And so since that time, that journal was one of the first sort of it contained one of the first discussions around what cenography might mean in Australia and its application. And like since then, 10 years later, a lot has changed in that scale, especially in terms of how we think about design and the language that we use as well, which is really interesting. And so it was great to kind of take stock and go, okay, well, what's happened over the past 10 years? What do we want to talk about now? And really broaden and open up what people could discuss by way of cenography, taking a very, very broad approach, a very expanded approach to what cenography could be. And so I issued a call out for pretty much anything under that banner of Australian cenography, from oral cenography to education practices, to First Nations practices, to what might be happening in cenography of our cities, or architecture, or cenography as therapy. And I just really wanted to capture sort of whatever I wanted to make a space, whatever people wanted to talk about under that umbrella, and not restrict it to a particular style of live performance or design aspect. I have written in the past about the notion of an Australian cenographic identity, and it's interesting. I just wrote the editorial for this special edition last week, which was a little bit late for what my wonderful editor might have liked, but we got there in the end. This special edition doesn't try to define Australian cenography or offer sort of one defining characteristic for it, but rather sort of celebrate its plurality. I think that question is it's not a useful question, I think, to try to answer, particularly for a special edition in terms of what is Australian cenography, but rather sort of celebrate all the different things that kind of come together for it. So one of the things I really wanted to do with this, based upon some discussions that I had in 2019, actually here at the Prague Quadrennial, around Australian cenographic practice, was trying to break down some barriers between academia and research and traditional publication methods and professional practitioners and the community of artists who are actually doing the thing and getting their voices captured. And so that was kind of a really big focus for me with the special edition, and will come in a couple of the the invited authors here, and one of the special projects, which is the last contribution, and try to get sort of work across a range of, you know, the resulting contributions. There's 8 of them in total, kind of span from all different types of performance and theatre making, cover almost every sort of design discipline, and span about, I think we have a representative from every state, except for potentially WA, which is a pity. I'd love to be able to say yes, we have one for everyone, but and across research, practice, and education. And so just an example, and all these images here are from contributions in that special edition. So one of the ones, and actually what was the stimulus for doing the special edition, came from, I ran a round table at the 2019 Prague Quadrennial, and those 2 images there are from Australia's contribution to PQ. So it's more of in Ukraine there with, I think it's Rapture. Yep, I just write down, I've got the right name there. And then that second image is Australia's performance exhibit. And so this roundtable brought together some of the leading educators and researchers across some of Australia's major training institutions, from NIDA to VCA to QT to a few others in between there. Again, tending to miss the WA contribution, which is something we need to work on with such a big, diverse country. Sometimes it's hard to capture everyone, as well as the student exhibit and the country exhibit coordinators, so Anna Triglone and Joe Briscoe there, and then some leading designers in the form of Rachel Burke, Nick McKeague, and Richard Roberts. And so we had a discussion about Australian education, research and practice under the guise of celebrating Australia's 50-year sort of anniversary at PQ. And so that's sort of one of the contributions in this article that talks about really a sort of a snapshot of the state of things in Australia. It was, you know, of course, pre-COVID, before a lot of things changed, but going back through and reading it there, it all still, you know, of course I was the lead author on that one, so I'm a bit biased, but there's a lot of stuff in there that still really applies in terms of some of the gaps that we have and the things we're working to address. And so we sort of offer that one as a bit of at the midway point between PQs, sort of a bit of a snapshot of looking back to sort of how some things we might need to address moving forward. Another contribution we have is from the wonderful Imogen Ross and Tanya Bayer. And so Tanya and Imogen, in their article, Eco-Cenography Conversations, had this wonderful back and forth between the 2 of them about the origins of, and like sort of the birth of, the eco-cenography movement, and how that has impacted their career and their design choices. And they sort of talk about, and, you know, because Tanya, obviously, her book is coming out in very, very soon. And so that one's going to be, you know, this real sort of, you know, setting the stage and claiming that space in terms of eco-cenography there for her. And so this is a bit of a precursor to that in terms of discussing what eco-cenography means and how it translates in the work of these 2 designers. So the first act kind of the special edition is a lot of first-person perspective, a lot of discussion around new movements, new challenges or old challenges we're still dealing with in the field, and education and research, and sort of offering suggestions and ways to move forward in that case. So the second, and there's another photograph there from Tanya's work. I've done that classic thing where I have not put the photo credits in my PowerPoint slide, so I apologize for that. All of these images are very well referenced in the actual special edition, or you can email me afterwards. So the second of sort of 4 acts of the special edition is looking at cenography for and in community. And so this one features the first publication from his practice as research work from Sean Coyle, who was studying down in Tasmania. Sean, who's now based over in New Zealand, who's teaching over there. So Sean conducted this really amazing research with the some particular Sydney gay community members, and looked at the idea of how to use queer space making techniques to deal with community trauma. And he coins this phrase and sort of offers the suggestion around what cenographic photography might mean. And his work and his article features these really incredible images that you can see here. So one of those, that is an example of one of his, the model boxes that were made as part of that process from his research. And so it's really beautiful because it sort of offers insight into Sean's adoption of cenographic scale model making as a tool to interrogate site-specific sites of queer trauma within the Sydney community, and provides an insightful example of cenography for community healing. So that one's really, really beautiful. I'm really happy to be able to sort of offer the first kind of publication of that new research. From there, still sort of focusing on community, but from one professional practitioner's sort of perspective of how the Australian design community navigated COVID. So Christina Smith is one of our leading set and costume designers in Australia, and I approached her to write a more reflective personal piece about her experience as a professional designer navigating lockdowns and stay-at-home orders and returns to work and further lockdowns, etc. So she's written this really beautiful piece where she talks about being untethered from her design process, and how coming back to a design, this is for Berlin from Melbourne Theatre Company, almost a year to the day from the time that the rehearsals got shut down in March of 2020, and trying to return to it and talking about how you navigate that process as a designer. It's a really beautiful piece, and kind of what made it even a little bit more heartbreaking is that, like, Christine had to change the ending. She had to change the conclusion about a month ago when Melbourne went back into another very long lockdown due to the Delta variant here in Australia. So when she wrote this, she felt like it was a retrospective thing, but now, of course, it's very much kind of still her lived experience. And so that's a really beautiful example from just one professional practitioner's perspective of what the community is going through. So Act 3 of 4 is looking at some of the newer, or not necessarily new, but the current philosophical trends or inspirations that are inspiring practitioners and researchers in Australia at the moment. So beginning with Eamon Darcy, who is a professional designer and has written before about Australian cenography in one of the few books that's published in this field. The name which is completely escaping me at the moment, written by Imogen Ross and, oh no, please Google, I think it's called Performance Design in Australia. It's a little too late, so that one's escaped from my brain. But Eamon talks about and sort of expands on Isabel Stenger's notions of ecologies of practice in his work, and is talking about his artist in residency program called Bearing the Narrative, which was with his institution down south. So sort of talks through Stenger's ecologies of practice as it applies to cenography and his work, and then shares a lot of his process there as designer, and there's some really beautiful imagery that goes along with his stuff there. Madeline Taylor, who's a costume researcher and designer and practitioner. She goes behind the scenes with Sydney Theatre Company's Top Girls and explores how new materialism and like Karen Barrad's notions of intra activity, interactions rather, have their role within the costume making process by going and doing ethnographic research on site with the making team of the Sydney Theatre Company wardrobe department, and studying their process and talking to them there. So looking at and kind of continuing the conversation that's growing a lot more at the moment in terms of the role that new materialism or object-based ontologies have in scenographic practice. And then finally, Roger Alsop, who as a sound designer didn't have any photographs in his essay, which I think is quite, is a beautiful comment on that. So Roger writes and sort of offers some insight into designing sound in Australian performing arts, and sort of has a broad discussion through education, through research, through some philosophical approaches there that sort of represents the sound design perspective in the special edition. And then finally, a special project that I curated, as I mentioned to you. One of the things I was really passionate about with this special edition was not just including academic essays, but trying to look beyond what options might be available. And so I identified and invited a wide range of Australian designers, and I gave them the provocation to identify one Australian work, their own or someone else's, that they think was pivotal in the development of Australian design, and whatever that might mean for them. And so this collection includes contributors across costume, lighting, sound, performance making, directing, education, etc. So we have contributors such as like Jennifer Irwin, who up until very recently, she just announced she's moving on. Oh wait, no, apologies, I'm thinking of someone else. Sorry, let me take that back. Jennifer Irwin, who's currently the head of costume with Bangarra Dance Theatre. I'm getting my people confused. David Walters, who's one of our preeminent lighting designers, Richard Roberts, one of our preeminent set designers, Tony Brompton, sound design, and then makers and designers such as people like Jeremy Nidek and Mick McKeague and Latai Tamalpo. And so this special edition, so everyone and all the photographs you can see here are those contributions from those people. So Jennifer shared this image of her work from Bangarra Dance Company's work Terrain, and talking about connections to country and connecting to country through costume design and First Nations perspectives of design in Australian dance theatre. David Walters shared this 1989 production from Queensland Theatre Company, looking at how lighting design began to evolve away from traditional approaches from lighting, to preferencing the face and features, to more of a dramatic sort of side lighting dance approach to contemporary theatre, which is this is 30, 40 years ago now. And so really sort of he identified a sort of a shift in Australian lighting design practice. Myself, I talked about Australia's first foray into the Prague Quadrennial in 1969, 67, apologies, I'm getting my years confused. And how, from the very first year that PQ was instituted, Australia has been present there. And I've written before about that first presentation. So a little bit there about that. In terms of queer performance and theatre making, this wonderful insight into a work called Underground, which looks at queer space making and queer approaches to scenography. a work of Jesus Christ Superstar in the late 70s, and its sort of adoption of the kind of the American stagecraft movement's approach, Robert Edmund Jones's sort of approach to scenography of a single gesture, and kind of how that began to play out in Australia. Oh yes, running out of time.
We have to wrap soon. Yes.
Yes,
sure.
I will. Cool. Okay, lovely. I'm almost done. So this is an example of, in the late 50s, the first documented use of projection in Australian theatre, which is a research project I'm trying to find out a little bit more on myself at the moment. Sound design in Australia and Australian Indigenous theatre. And then expanded sort of notions of scenography. So this is from Latai's work that won one of the Performance Design Awards at PQ in 2019. And so she discusses her perspective and her work in that sense. So apologies for, I think I probably talked a little bit too long there, but that's just kind of sort of the process that's going to make this special edition. And so that's coming out in December of this year. And yeah, I'll wrap that up there. If you have any questions, please shoot me an email. So sorry, Kate, for losing track of time.
No, it's not at all, not at all. We started late, so thank you ever so much. Has anybody got any immediate questions, or shall we move on and come back to questions afterwards? Yeah, okay. So, oh goodness, sorry. So I should have gone on to the next slide. There we are, that's better. So can I introduce Sue Field? And I'm quoting you, Sue, artist, designer, academic, and author. So we're asking you to present on the sort of wonderful publication that I've seen, the Cenographic design drawing, performative drawing in an expanded field, and now the new work that, well, a lot of new works, but in particular the one that you're working on now, the anatomical drawing. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to you, if that's okay.
Thanks, Kate, and thank you for asking me to talk about my work. So just quickly, just a little bit about myself. Obviously, I'm an Australian academic. I'm at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. It's 11:45 at night in Sydney. We all came out of 107 days of lockdown yesterday. So we called it Freedom Day yesterday anyway. I went to the NIDA, the National Institute of Dramatic Art. That's my undergraduate degree. I then did 2 masters and a PhD at UNSW Art and Design. But I'm going to just go straight to my PowerPoint and talk about my books. So here we go. All right, so can everybody see my screen? I'm just so used to Teams at the moment. So Kate, can you see? Yeah, so I'm just going to then enlarge it and just tell me if it's, you know, visible. Is that good with my name? Okay. Okay, so interesting just quickly that Tessa talked about it's been 10 years since there was a featured special edition on, you know, Australian cenography. I actually contributed, I was asked by Andrew Filmer to contribute to that particular journal, which actually started my whole journey into writing, well, not actually writing, but publishing. And I've written quite a number of journal articles and 2 book chapters, all particularly focusing on the scenographic design drawing. And it was that prompted Phil Sorden, who's the editor of my book, The Cenographic Design Drawing, Performative Drawing in an Expanded Field, along with Russell Marshall and Marsha Maskinian. So they're the editors, and Phil contacted me in 2018 and said I you know, looked like I was an expert on these very strange little thinking drawings, and that would I like to write a book. So absolutely. And so this was published in at the beginning of this year, 2021, by Bloomsbury Publishers. So what is it all about? I'm just going to read this so I don't get too off on a tangent. So this book explores the set design drawings for theatre and live performance, highlighting their unique qualities within the greater arena of drawing practice and theory. Cenographic design drawings visualise the images in the designer's mind's eye early in the design process. They are the initial design tool in the creative engagement with theatre, opera, dance, and non-text-based performance, such as post-dramatic theatre. It is in particular this body of drawings that are unique in both a performative and theatrical representation of multiple worlds within the stage space. They are world creating. So, I devote 2 chapters on sort of historical, a little bit of sort of recent history, but then a large part of the book is looking at, digital scenography and current manifestations of the scenographic design drawing. So I also identify how these drawings have transcended their traditional pragmatic function and entered into a new expanded drawn space where the drawing itself has transformed into an autonomous performative object. Is it in this space that they not only embrace performative encounters and imaginative exchange, but are also distinguished from other forms of drawing by their inherent theatricality? So that's through animation, and I'll show you a little bit of that in a minute. So that's it. That's my book that came out. That's the cover. That's one of my, I also have a drawing practice. That's my drawing on the front cover. This is part of a series on all forms of drawing, and the series is called Drawing In and published by Bloomsbury. So just quickly, what is a scenographic thinking drawing or scenographic design drawing? It's, early in the design process is when you're confronted with a script, and not all designers, but a lot of set and costume designers, of course, do little doodly drawings and annotation actually in the script. And this is what I was particularly fascinated, and this is obviously one of my early iterations. And then that can develop into your journal. These are still scenographic design drawings, but these ones are now, you show the director, the performers, the producer. So the thinking drawings are usually very private, and then they develop into more of a storyboard. And this again is another example of my own work. But my book is obviously full of other people's work. There's a little bit of mine, but it's primarily other amazing artists and designers. And the Peacham drawing, which when I was telling about that publication in 2012, which was this special edition, my contribution to that publication, I got permission to use the Peacham drawing, which is a very, very, it's the only extant drawing of Shakespeare's time. And if I just look at my notes, so this drawing has survived the ephemeral and fleeting spirit of theatre. It was executed in 1595 during a rehearsal of William Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus. This drawing a doodle in the margin of the script of a long-leaf document belonging to the Marquis of Bath. And just very quickly, for that first publication, and I sought out the copyright to use this drawing in the journal, and it cost me £40. And I remember I contacted the Marquis of Bath, which unfortunately tragically died last year from COVID, but I did get permission. I had to sign this unbelievable contract that looked like something out of the 19th century. Anyway, what's fascinating about this is here is a script, and then there's this little doodle of a scene in Titus Andronicus. So also in the book, this is again in the first 2 chapters where I'm looking primarily at 20th century artists and scenographers. And this is David Hockney's for his design for the opera, The Rake's Progress in 1975. And it's one of his little thinking drawings. And what I find fascinating, and I got permission to publish this, Cost me quite a lot of money in my book. But again, you can see the thinking of David Hockney. He's sitting there testing out his pens, but also doing these little extra doodles. I assume it's Tom, who's one of the protagonists in the Rake's Progress. But the book that's early on in the book. I then obviously look at more digital scenography. And in this context, of course, is these drawings being animated. And so 1927, which is obviously anybody who's British will probably all know about this amazing company, which the artistic directors is Susan Andrade and Paul Barrett being the illustrator and animator. And so they were commissioned, they were asked by the Australian director, Barry Kosky, who's also the artistic director of the Komische Opera in Berlin, to design and choreograph the opera for him. And it's extraordinary. These are Paul Barrett's wonderful drawings, and they're animated in to sort of capture that feeling of early 1920s stop motion animation. Of course, it's done digitally, but it's an extraordinary piece, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. I saw it in Perth, where the performers have to, it's not the animations that are following the performers or the singers having to absolutely, split second perform with the animations. And how I went about it is, of course, I wanted his thinking drawings, and I found an email with lots of searching, and I contacted Paul Barrett and I said, do you have any of your little thinking drawings? And he wrote back and he said, oh gosh, I found the box stuffed away in my wardrobe, and I pulled them all out. And he sent, the most amazing 8 of them. I got 8 of these incredible drawings. He did hundreds of them working with Barry Kosky. And so again, these are published in my book. And this again just shows the thinking, which is what the book's about. And then ultimately, then it's animated. And he did the animations with obviously a digital technical company, but he drew all the wonderful drawings. So that's essentially my book that was published earlier this year. I then, so I finished my PhD in 2019. So in that first book, one chapter is actually about my PhD. Before anybody thinks my whole PhD is about these drawings, only one chapter is devoted to the PhD. But anyway, so then so it would have been last year, what's his name, Phil Sorden contacted me again saying, look, the drawing in series is still going. Can you think of anything else that you're interested in writing about, some other form of drawing? And so I thought of the anatomical drawing, which is very peculiar, sort of divergent from my first book, except that my father, who's now retired, is a doctor, and I have all his anatomical drawings that he gave me a few years ago. And they're amazing. They're just these meticulously extraordinary drawings when he was a student at Sydney University as a medical student. Anyway, I've been fascinated in this area anyway because of the sort of the way that the anatomical theatre, the traditional anatomical theatre, is so similar to the drama theatre. Anyway, I then came up with a proposal, and it's not just your typical anatomical drawings. I am looking at, again, the first 2 chapters are sort of historical relationship, and then looking at contemporary manifestations of the anatomical drawing in artworks and in cenography. But just to give you an idea, the type of anatomical drawings that I'm interested in, here we've got the Leiden theatre or anatomical theatre, which is in Netherlands. It still exists. And you can see the similarity with also a traditional theatre, drama theatre. But what I love about this drawing, and these are the ones that fascinates me, is, you know, just looking at this extraordinary etching. You can see that the dancing skeletons, it's a whole staged performance, and you know the cadavers in the center of the stage, and then we have the two skeletons up the front, which is Adam and Eve having the apple, handing it over to Adam. I mean, they're skeletons, and so my book, which I'm writing at the present moment, is looking at more the performativity of some of these drawings. I'm also, again, this historical connection this is Christian Huygens. He animated very, very early animation using a magic lantern in 1659 of Hans Holbein's drawing of a skeleton juggling its own skull. So again, it's this connection with performance and jumping, you know, very quickly. I'm also, a whole chapter is devoted to the Danse Macabre, the Dance of Death, and that goes right back to medieval times. But here we have 500 years later, the animations by Walt Disney. This is 1929. It's completely hilariously ghoulish. If you ever get a chance to have a look at it, you may already know of it. And then jumping again, as I said, I then have first two chapters have a historical connection, and then I jump into the 20th century and into the 21st century. And here's Peter Greenway's short film, which is M is for Man, Music and Mozart, 2001. Just look for my notes. And so this is completely fascinating. I'll just play a little bit, but so it reveals Peter Greenway's distinctive cinematic trope of collaging, splicing and erasing multiple layers of visual imagery to create a series of meta-theatrical tableaus. But why am I interested in it for my book is, which I'll show you this one song, the worn and stained pages from the 16th century medical text by Andreas Vesalius is inserted as animated anatomical drawings. So here Peter Greenway and his team animate these traditional anatomical drawings, which is in the text by Andreas Vesalius, a very famous text. So the film is also set within a reconstruction of a 16th century anatomical theatre in Padua, Italy, which still exists. So I'm losing my voice because it's getting late. So I just quickly play this. This is the last thing. So you can see, I'll just skip to it. So you can see, hang on, I'll just, where I'm going with this book. So it is about looking at visual artists, contemporary scenographers and filmmakers such as Peter Greenway, and how, in his case, you can see he's using these extraordinarily wonderful 16th century anatomical drawings and animating them. And just to finish off, I'm also a practicing drawing artist, if everybody can see my screen. And we've been in lockdown, and this particular work I did last year, it was selected this year for the Temple Drawing Exhibition in Loughborough in the UK. It's called Drowning in My Living Room, a self-portrait. I began this in lockdown last year. It's 1.5 meters by nearly 2 meters. It's 6 6 panels. It's all done in black ink and collage. It's me hypothetically drowning in my living room, because I live in a 1920s apartment with all those beautiful doors, and I also live on Coogee Beach. So the one I just did recently is also done during lockdown. So that's it before I lose my voice. Okay, sorry. Golly.
Hey, thank you ever so much, Sue. That's wonderful, and a very swift run through some extraordinary work. Can you bear to be up for a few minutes more, do you think?
Yeah. Sorry about my voice. It's just a bit late. It's now 12.
I know. I'm sorry. I sort of promised we wouldn't go on.
I'm so privileged for you to ask me to do this.
No, it's great. I need to apologise to you for the small but very attentive group of us. It's just that they've programmed all the different commission meetings at the same time, and I think there are any number of us who will be watching each other's sessions, but in recording. So I apologise for that. So I know we will have a lot more people watching us, but it'll be a recorded session.
And there are many who just woke up, or maybe still not
yes,
wake up.
Of course, Dinesh. Thank you. Dinesh is the chair of the Lighting Commission, so thank you very much for being here, Dinesh. Wonderful work, both of you. I think I'm going to kick off with a question, but others who are here, please do ask questions of this wonderful work. For both of you, really, it's the point at which the drawings, as you describe them, Sue, thinking drawings, and that sort of that wonderful phrase that thinking through drawing, isn't it? That we kind of, that's how we start off. What I'm quite fascinated by in your drawing, but also in the work Tessa's talking about, is where that preparatory, that thinking, actually becomes the stuff of the actual performance, or the actual final artwork. Do you know what I mean? Because it does go through it goes through stages, doesn't it?
I think the early thinking drawings is the more personal, is really just the designer thinking, trying to get those images out of their head. And then you, because it's such a collaborative art form, you then might start to work with the director and still be doing those little drawings, but then it really does become part of a team, and they have to be, I think the drawings have to become more and more explicit, or the models. So not everybody draws. I've got a colleague who thinks by model making, and actually thinks also using orthographics on the computer. So it's just, I think, which I make it very clear in the first book, how much it is, those initial thinking ideas, but then Cenographic design drawings can go a little bit, they go further, they become into the journal. And then you can talk, I mean, this is nearly become obsolete, I suppose 40, 30 years ago, you then had those set design drawings, which, that's now done largely on the computer, I would say almost exclusively done on the computer now, and 3D graphics and all sorts of things. But yeah, so that's the area I love, and now I'm into an anatomical drawing, which is a bit different.
It's extraordinary. But as you say, they can't quite resist making them theatrical at the same time, can they? It's just
the 16th around, they with anatomical drawing. If you look at them, you have these flayed bodies, but they're in these idyllic backdrops. They look like they're in a stage play, but you've got these. But not all of the anatomical art. So, for instance, Leonardo, which I don't talk much about because his anatomical drawings are very much observational drawings.
Yeah.
So he's not theatricalizing them, or, you know, but, you know, you get the, you know, particularly the 17th century, the Dutch particularly, would even draw a fly, an absolutely trompe l'oeil of a fly on the body. just anyway.
Yeah.
Read my book in a year.
Okay. Yes.
It is fun, but it's so bizarre. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Tessa, with
Um,
you.
I was going to say that I'm so looking forward to that book, Sue. It sounds fabulous. And yes, I'm so glad that you mentioned your contribution to that special edition. I forgot to throw your name in there earlier before. And, not to speak of my from my own background to answer your question, Kate, but thinking about maybe the contributors from the special edition, one that this kind of, sort of thinking through drawing, that kind of the way it came out through there is with Christina Smith's reflection on coming back to design after having a year break because of lockdowns and because of COVID, and using her thinking drawings and her model boxes as a way of trying to re-access the passion that she had for her design, both herself but then also with her team. And so while of course it's not quite to the same level of detail that Sue's talking about there, but I think that's kind of another interesting avenue or connection there, a sort of manifestation, a way that those drawings might make themselves into the process.
Yeah. Is there a point at which the thinking drawings become the actual thing for you? So are they always preparation, or do they sometimes actually become it because you can't, well, that's it, that's it? Or is there always a kind of a real progression? I'm thinking about, go on, sorry.
Yeah, so in my book I do talk about where the drawings become autonomous, in the sense that they leave behind that sense of being a pragmatic preparatory drawing. So, and that's where I'm looking at Paul Barrett's work, where he still where the drawing takes off and becomes an animation and becomes a performance in itself. So he started all, obviously I showed you that he started all those wonderful drawings. He's the most amazing illustrator. and then but it's those productions where the drawings become then the sonography. And so I've got, I also use Dan Potra and all sorts of examples in that book of where the drawings no longer become pragmatic and become actual performance, part of the performance. Yeah.
So when you were making your drawings, your lockdown drawings, the big drawings, were you aware of them being a kind of performance, as it were, in the drawing of them, because they're so big, and because did they just expand?
The process is like a diary. So with all my drawings, because I work all like that on that sort of, I start with a large page, and I just start to draw, and then it keeps creeping and getting bigger and bigger. It's more like a stream of consciousness. I know that sounds a bit wanky, but I don't plan them. So it's very different from, designing, from my past practice as a production designer. So, that they're very much me sitting and thinking of waves, drawing, I can hear it, and I'm surrounded by doors, and so there's nothing planned about them. They just progress, and because they've got layers of collage, if I don't like something, I just collage over the top of it. I just work over the top. So layers and layers and layers. So that's a very different process from design. It's more of but I've been doing that all my life.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
That's it. Yeah.
because that's much more akin to a lot of the way that the drawing sort of in performance, or artists working with dancers, for instance, are working up there where the work goes straight to projection, or goes is happening in the space at the same time. I don't know whether you're finding that, Tessa.
Sorry, Kate, could you just repeat that question?
Well, just it seems that that's a much more performative thing, and it much more relates to the work where we see people drawing that it gets translated into projection straight away, or it's accompanying movement. It's actually a part of the performance. There's no, I don't know how much preparatory work.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the and Sue, I'd be really interested to know if your book touches on that at all. Is I think one of the interesting sort of differences there is that in that moment, it's the looking at that in the performances at that in-between point between that live drawing and the body, and the realizing in space in real time, as compared to that drawing being, you know, to use Sue's words, there's that thinking process, and some of those that are personal, and then they might get exposed and opened and refined and become all set in stone. That is like an immediacy, an immediate reaction, and responding to movement in the space. And so it's kind of like it'd be very interesting, of course, I'm sure, to take those drawings away and look at them by themselves, but, you know, being put out there in that real-time moment to be part of that work. So yeah, I think it's probably my thoughts on that.
Are there any questions from anybody who's here? Tommy, thank you. Anybody else?
I love that painting behind you, Kate.
So do I. Thank you. You're the first person that said that. It's one of the very few pieces of work I've ever bought. And it's absolutely a mixture of, it's knitted. It's a woven sort of layers, a bit like geological layers, and then it's got plaster on top, and then painting and drawing on it as well. So it's a very layered piece. And it
Dutch artist feel about it.
Yeah, it's actually about layered. It's got lots of pots, as if it was an archaeological exploration, that's sort of a dig or something on it. It's sort of fragments. But thank you for noticing. It's lived with me for 40 years. Yes.
I believe I saw Dinesh's hand up. Is that correct?
Dinesh, I'm sorry. I'm talking. Sorry. Dinesh,
Oh,
sorry.
absolutely. We are here to talk. So you don't need to, sorry. Very interesting work. I something very reflective, and I think pretty much. I mean, there are artists around the world who work on what Sue kind of shared on the idea of performative drawings. And it's not a question, but I think it's probably a mention of two artists from Indian continent. Satjit Ray was a film director, and Satjit Ray actually drawn frame by frame. And as you were describing, pretty much the minute detail into the costumes, like flower into the costume, how that would do. And it's said that Satjit Ray never shot any shot again. He was so perfect in his composition and with the drawing that he would put camera angle, actors, costumes, everything as it's been drawn into the frame. Contrary to Satjit Ray and quite contemporary to Satjit Ray was Ritik Ghatak. And Ritik Ghatak, and from same Bengali cinema and Bengali theater, they all come from the Bengali region. And Ritik Ghatak would never drawn a single picture, and was as good a filmmaker as Satjit Ray, and sometimes critic would say that probably greater than Satjit Ray. But Ritik Ghatak was like, there is a shooting schedule, and he would go and look at to the sun and would say, "Oh no, sun is too angry today. Let's go back home." And so much intuitive about his filmmaking. So those two artists in cinema, and then I want to mention one of very intuitive designer, director, actor, who is a self-taught caricaturist, Professor Robin Das, and actor as well. And I know that I work closely with Robin, and he would not draw drawing for the set or for the design, but would draw something like compositional objects and put, so drawings are pretty much like a caricaturist subtext of the scene. And when I talked to Robin a couple of times, he would say that my design is for actors. So I design from the perspective of actor, how actor would feel, or how my design can be a co-actor. And I wonder whether, Sue, what you have shared, is there any reflection on or any relationship to kind of that kind of thought? Thank you.
I mean, particularly when I was practicing, any self-devised theatre or performance, and a lot of post-dramatic theatre works like this, where, you know, the whole performance is not necessarily driven by text. I would sit in the rehearsal room, drawing and designing around the movements of the actors, the performance of the actors, and I would negotiate with the actors about what they want to wear, if that's what you mean. I did a lot of that when I was, it just depends which sort of, so opera, you had to design the thing 2 years before you ever saw it. But something like, self-devised performance or dance, you would, you know, definitely sit in rehearsal room and not necessarily sort of pre-work. You would draw with the performers and draw their bodies and et cetera, if that's what you mean.
It's pretty much. And I want to just take a liberty of share something which I do, and that could be pretty much probably same, but.
Yes, yeah. Storyboarding it, yeah.
Yeah.
This is, and this is pretty much one of the rehearsal I'm doing right now. It's exactly the same what you have just shared, Shu, that I would doodle. I'm not a great drawer, so but I doodle along with what I'm doing. And
read my book, you'll see it's everything from the most schematic doodles that some designers who actually, so what's the name, Pamela Howard, she definitely works in the rehearsal room. She doesn't usually work in a studio and kind of build up the design like that. She sits in rehearsal and works with the performers. So there's multiple ways of doing this. Yeah, that's very interesting. So thanks for showing me. Yeah.
I suppose what's really interesting is how much is in one's head already. So how much the picture gets formed, you know, and then what your hand is doing is putting the picture on the page, and how much is the thinking as you're drawing, or the thinking manifesting itself, sort of, so that your head doesn't know until it comes out on the paper.
Well, there's been so many books.
I'm sure.
Scientific studies about, you know, the thought and the hand, and you know, hand and mind, or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's a completely absorbing process, really, isn't it? All of that. Is there interest in Australia in this, or are you finding it's a kind of European interest?
I think Australia, you know, yes, I think they are. I think certainly when I was working at NIDA, there's a strong interest, I think. But the trouble with the performance industry in Australia, it's so small, and we've been really banged on the head by COVID. I mean, I know it's happened all around the world, but it's so small in Australia that, you know, we've crucified, you know, our leading Opera Australia is just hemorrhaging. I mean, I can't see them. It'll be years before they get back on their feet. So it is a small world. So yes, I think, you know, my books are probably more read over in America and in Europe.
Yeah. I know. I'm just seeing all the publishers, you know, Bloomsbury and so on, and then Tracy, and all the publications seem to be Europe-based that one's writing for. I don't know. You're agreeing, Renato? Is that? I
mean, Tessa mentioned that that Imogen Ross published Performance Design in Australia. Well, I'm in that book as well, and that was 2001. So that was the last time they did a major book.
Gosh,
there's been another one, Stephen Curtis, but it's more about, you know.
Yeah, it's a practical guide to,
like,
yeah.
How
and it's, yeah. And it's a fabulous book, and it's a great that, you know, Stephen sort of weaves in contemporary practice from Australian designers in there. But yeah, we haven't had anything like Imogen's book, you know, that had, you know, yourself and Eamon Darcy and other people contributing to it. So it's pretty, it amazes me that we've gone 20 years without that. So Sue, maybe we'll spearhead the next one, shall we? Yeah. And Carl as well. Where are you? There you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yeah, Dinesh.
Yeah, no, I was just sharing, Stu, I know that John Clark is writing a book on NIDA.
Oh, really?
And,
so
yeah.
John Clark, I was at NIDA when obviously he was the head of NIDA. He was the head of NIDA for 40 years. And I went to his farewell in 2004. But gosh, he's quite elderly.
Yeah, so John is a good friend, and John and I don't want to convert this conversation into friendly talk, maybe we can do later, but just to bring the reference of a book that John Clark is writing, a book on the history of NIDA.
Oh, wow.
And he came and directed a show at National School of Drama in New Delhi when we were a student, and Peter Cook designed that, the Trojan Women. And I know that Peter Cook worked very differently than what you have just shared. And Peter was the director at Carnegie for 12 years, just retired. And these two folks are very close friends. Peter is very close, and I know John. And just kind of bringing the talk back to what we were discussing, that I know that when Peter Cook designed, he worked extensively with model. Yeah. 3 of his production design, one for Trojan War or Trojan Women, another one for one of the Indian directed Just Justice, Sophocles Just Justice, Royston Abel, which Peter designed, and there was one other show. I don't know. I mean, there can be discussions on this whole approach, the whole approach of Pamela Howard's approach, sitting into a rehearsal and designing. And what Robin, I just bring the idea of Robin, that he think design from the perspective of an actor and would literally walk on a stage, kind of conceiving how would an actor behave in this space. So thinking design from actor's perspective. And then you do have a third school, which is, this is school of model and kind of pre-designed and take the design into the rehearsal room before the rehearsal begins. Any thought from both the presenter on those approaches, so like your own experiences? Thank you.
Well, just quickly, I think when you pre-design a show, like with the director, it's to do with money. So self-devised theatre, which I've also done as well. You could be 2 months in the rehearsal room. That's very, very expensive. we particularly, you're more luxurious over in Europe, and maybe other countries in the world, but in Australia, at best you have 6 weeks rehearsal. Probably most of the time it's a month. So it all has to be tightly planned beforehand, which is a big problem, because you don't get the sort of collegial stuff happening between the actors and the designer. Anyway,
yeah, I think, yes. Sue, thank you. I know, well, the eye to the clock.
I'm teaching it at 9
Yes.
o'clock.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much. Just to answer Tommy, I think that there will definitely be a bookshop at WSD, and an online bookshop is a very good idea. I've got a couple of titles I'm going to advertise later on today as well. So, Sue, is there going to be a paperback? That's what I really want to know. Or paperbacks?
No,
Because
the book is a lot of it's being sold as an ebook.
right, yes, it's sort of institution level pricing at the moment.
So the universities, certainly the ones I know, have got it as an ebook.
Right, yes. Okay, Tommy, sorry.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. There's quite a good idea, because I always keep some of my students and then ask where we can get some good book. I always remember I can get the first-hand information in the previous conference. There's my handout page in between the talk. So whether we have the access, also we get discount as a member to buy in the shop. So I think that maybe particularly in progress, because some of the book is in progress, or that maybe a launch will be good for the coming WSD, or no matter. I keep on the people asking me where I can get the writing book, where I get the Cenographic book for my students. So if I get the e-list, that will be great.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's a really good idea, and I think something like that is in plan for WSD. And Sue will hopefully keep in touch about the anatomical drawings. See where that goes.
Cenography, yep.
And Tessa as well. You've got your book, so we must keep talking about that.
Definitely, that one's a bit further away than Sue.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you ever so much, both of you, and for staying up so late. I'm going to move on to the next stage of this meeting, if that's okay. But thank you. Please, and do come again tomorrow to the other publications talk, or to anything else you'd like to. So thank you. Thank you. See you later. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, thank you. Bye. Bye. Okay, so goodness, that was exciting. I'm just going to move on just very briefly, and I'm going to try and keep an eye on the time, so that we've actually got some time to talk rather than me talking all the time. So just the next thing on the agenda was updates regarding world stage design. And as you can see, we put in the Research Commission put in 3 proposals for sort of panels, if you like, for sessions. And we focus very much on publications. That's partly because there will be a bookshop, and I know that there are launches of publications at WSD. So it seems good to be joined up, and it's also an opportunity to, as we've just done, be talking about work that's in progress, and also for younger researchers thinking about how do they sort of start on that journey of articles, essays, blogs even, and then sort of the monographs and so on. So I think, and particularly with e-publications now possible, it's a very useful discussion for us to be having, I think. So then the performance-based and cultural geographers was kind of really thinking about the indigenous ways of knowing strand, very important core strand of WSD, and thinking that we and this was also talking with Dinesh about different cultures' own performance space in the widest sense of it, and cultural geographies relating to the where, the whens, the how our story is told, what methods do we use, about shadow puppetry being a very important, both not just for it's not just an entertainment, but it's also a way of political comment, all sorts of that Nora Amin talked about, lots of things like that. So we're hoping that that will also be an umbrella, if you like, for some very interesting things. So we know that there'll be a research commission at WSD. We're also hoping that we'll be a part of the numerous other events that are scheduled for 2022, and in particular Cena, I think, in September of next year, September, October of next year. And obviously working online gives us the opportunity to join in with things for people, for members who can't travel for whatever reason to the actual events. So that's something we're working on. And then this is a kind of a project that we've been thinking about for a while, and if at all possible, would really like to develop in the new year. So Carl, I don't know whether you want to say something about this, because this was your idea that we've been talking about for a while.
Sure. So this started off in as a wild pitch in I think in governing board at one point, and it's always been something that I've been interested in with OISTAT, especially as we've gone to this digital Zoom environment. And if you forgive the expression of it's always 5 o'clock somewhere, that it seemed interesting to have a conference or a symposium based on that concept, but instead of getting around, you come in and you see a paper as you're getting off from work or you're going on lunch break, and then you can go back into your day-to-day lives and then come back again when you have a free moment. And the idea is that the conference would rotate so that you would have, say it's 5 o'clock in Brisbane, then we go another 2 hours, it's 5 o'clock in Taipei, then it's another couple hours, and we're in China and Russia and India and so on and so forth, so that the conference geographically moves across the globe for a period of hours. Realizing that 24 hours is quite ambitious, I figured a good trial was 12, and see how we go and make the best of it. To put some spine to this conference, because I think it's really interesting to think about how we see theater and performance in our society today, especially as we're coming out of COVID, or hopefully coming out of COVID. Let's put the positive spin on it. Hopefully, that really looking at what theater and performance enables us to think about in terms of our future and in terms of society. Because I think a lot of times when we have conferences and OISTAT, it's a lot about the present moment, and we sometimes lose the future thinking of what the present moment can inform us about choices for the future. So I thought it would be very interesting to engage on this topic using the UN's Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah.
How can we? Yeah.
Do you want me to go through them, or I'm terrified I'm going to lose this PowerPoint if I do, but let's try. Yeah, 17 goals. If you can all see them. Goal 3. I can't see goal 4. Clean water. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, I haven't pulled up on my screen. If I can say share.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can share screen for a second. Hopefully you can see my screen. So It's a series of targets, each with their own subcategories that the UN has set up back in 2015 to reach in 2030. And aside from a couple countries in Central and Western Europe, most of the rest of the world is underneath the thresholds of those goals. So it seems interesting to explore how theater contributes to any of these notions as part of a worldwide symposium. Where you engage with it, I think, is up to you as the researcher contributor, but I think I like the idea of looking at quality education, thinking about global citizenship within that, or thinking about gender equality and how we combat that in theater, or how we look at building sustainable cities or communities, and theater and culture is a way for us to look at that, because we already do this as part of our discussions and look at it in terms of how we justify and rationalize theater today. It just seems interesting to engage with that framework of the UN. So
I think we talked about that those little sessions could be live in a project that was happening. They wouldn't, they're not necessarily being in a talking room. They could actually be on the set or in an environment where a project is happening. And so they come live from there, but there might be some other ingredients that are recorded or presentations as well. So it's a sort of a hybrid in that place, as well as a hybrid, sort of screen thing. So is that, so what we need, what we absolutely need to do is to put together a group who would really like to work on this, to develop this. So please do just say in the chat if you'd be interested in doing so, and we'll kind of get together a group to work on it. We were thinking of sort of February, weren't we? Really,
yeah, February, March. So we can get the group together, refine the call, and then give people some time to mull it over before we get too far into the spring semester in the Northern Hemisphere, or too far in the first semester in the Southern Hemisphere. So
yeah, yes, exactly. And sort of I guess looking at where the contributions would come will kind of define will define the shape of it beyond that, really. So any thoughts on that, people? Does that seem a useful and interesting project? Yeah. Okay, so I should go on. So I'm on any other business, so I'm going to cycle through quite quickly because it would be good to have a bit more talking time. So first of all, I just want really to acknowledge and to remember Ev Simen, who was a designer and TV and film designer and design manager, who started the Turkish Oyster Center. And many of us went to a rather wonderful visit to Istanbul, I think in 2004. And there's an obituary from William Kenton, because it was the Education Commission who were invited in particular. And I was on that one at the time. And we had a wonderful time there. Ev Simen's sister took us all around Istanbul and to some wonderful historic sites and so on. And we went to the Mimar University where they both had trained. And we have just lots of very good memories of Ev Simen and the work and the hard work she did in bringing Turkey into Oystead. And then Michael Hall, this is very much, he was the founder of Roscoe Paints UK, or Roscoe in the UK. And he introduced the Roscoe range of paints to the UK in the 1980s. And having been a designer painter who worked with size glue and pigment, and powder paints, the horrible smell of it all, the Roscoe paints transformed my life. And he really did transform painting, scene painting in the UK. I'm presumably in the States, it was the same. And I don't know how much else around the world, but you could paint dance floors with them. You could do all sorts of sort of things that you couldn't do with other paints before that. So we just will, there'll be a more formal remembrance of him and his work. But he's sadly died this autumn. So then just some publications that I just wanted to, that I've been seeing as I've been wandering around the digital globe. This one in particular, Renaissance Fun. I hope Peter's still there. The Machines Behind the Scenes by Philip Steadman. And I've put Philip Steadman's own site up because he's such an extraordinary polymath. Sort of real Renaissance man, writes on so many things, is still teaching at university. Is quite an extraordinary man, so that's really worth looking at. The Bibiana drawings from the Jules Fisher collection in the States. This is the site of the exhibition, but it also has a book, a catalogue to the exhibition, which has collected together drawings I've not seen before. Beautiful, beautiful Baroque kind of extraordinary stage creations. And then Sophia's book, Performance Costume, New Perspectives and Methods, we're talking, or she's talking about tomorrow.